Yes guys, welcome back to the channel. I've got a really exciting video for you today. It's an interview that I did with a guy called Eric. Now, for people who've been following me for a while, you might have seen pictures of Eric's hair system that I saw on a Facebook group, and I did a video about it. That's also going to pop up at the end of this video if you want to watch that. But I was totally blown away by his hair system, and I really wanted to learn more about him, his journey with hair systems, and what makes his one look so great. Now, with Eric, his story is a really interesting one because he actually first started wearing systems in the 1990s, the early 90s, and you'll be blown away by how different the technology was between then compared to what it is now. Now, if you want a new hair system or if you're looking to get your first hair system, don't forget I've negotiated 15% off with Levivid, Adam15 in the coupon code box on levividhair.com. Don't forget to miss out on that deal. Now, let's segue into the discussion that I had with Eric. Hope you enjoy. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I've got Eric on. He's doing an interview, or I'm doing an interview with him. He's very kindly agreed to do that. You might have seen an image of him on one of my previous videos because I thought his hair system looked absolutely amazing. Probably the most realistic hair system I've ever seen. And I've been fortunate enough to get him on today to have a chat with me and basically answer my questions. I'm hoping that you guys will find it really, really helpful, either if you're new to hair systems and you're still on the fence, or if you're a long-term hair system wearer and you just wanted someone else's perspective. I hope you enjoy it. Eric, thank you so much for joining me today. How's the weather in your neck of the woods?
Very windy and cold.
Is it
Here
about
is
as cold as it gets?
we're getting next week single digits, but Tennessee is usually pretty mild even in the winter. But we're getting, I think we're in the 30s right now. Winds blowing in like the 30-mile-an-hour range and gusting to 60. So
Okay.
heard a rocking chair on my front porch just blow over a few minutes ago. So
Oh wow. Okay, so it is windy, but no
yeah,
snow. You guys don't get really snow at all.
we'll get a freak storm. I think the last one was in 2018. We got about 10 inches. We get like 2 to 4, maybe a dusting occasionally. That's about normal for us.
Mhm.
Occasionally some black ice, but yeah, it's usually the early spring storms. We get some good snow if it happens just right.
Yeah, enough snow for snowball fights.
There you go. Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Well, so if you could just tell the audience sort of what part of America you're from and how you sort of first came across hair systems, because I know that, remember you saying to me that you actually started wearing quite a long time ago, and then you went a period of time not wearing, and now you're back to wearing. So if you could sort of talk to us about that, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I'm from East Tennessee. We're up in the mountains. We're right in the corner of the state near North Carolina, Virginia, Kentucky. So Appalachian country, as we say here. But at any rate, a beautiful place to live. Four seasons. Love living here, except for winter. I'm not much of a winter fan, but I endure. Yeah, started going bald when I was, I think, 16 or 17 years old. It was back in the 80s. I'm an old guy. I'm 55.
You don't look it.
Well, thank you. I'm blessed with good parents with a good gene pool, I guess. They aged well too. So,
And good
uh,
hair systems.
yeah. My dad did a comb over
Did
for a
he?
long time. Didn't look bad. It was not the part of your ear thing, but at any rate, he passed on this year. So, rest his soul. But so as I progressed in my hair loss, I was like very uncomfortable with that. I'm like, my friends made fun of me. They left me with this little tuft of a hair in the front, and as it went back and around, and then further back. So I was married, first marriage, went through a divorce, very insecure, I should say. And that's when I really started thinking about hair systems. You know, young guy, early 20s, going bald, wife left you. How am I going to have another woman that really wants something to do with a bald guy? And bald shaved heads were not really in so much then. So it wasn't like the thing that everybody did if you were going bald. So I went with a hair system, one of the common ones then. It was pretty pricey for me because I was early into my career, limited resources. It was a sacrifice. But I wore it for a couple years on and off. Technology wasn't as good as it is now. And after about, I guess, 3 years, 4 years of it, I I'd remarried. My wife didn't really care whether I had hair or not. And so I decided to go with a short haircut then, to take it off. And then I eventually started shaving it. So I was skin from the time I was 25 till this year.
Mhm.
To be honest with you, I'm not sure exactly why I started thinking about it. It could have been my father's passing. He passed in May. Uh,
Yeah.
I've always looked at them and thought, well, that really did make me look better, but I don't know. That's a lot of things to have to deal with. Do I want to do that? So I finally, later this year, I think in September, I decided I'm going to give it a go. And at that point, I of course started watching videos, watching yours, watching all the other guys, and researching it. And so they have changed a lot. My goodness, there's super thin. You can't even see the hair. You can wear it back now. That in the back then I wore it down in the wings. That was the thing in the 80s and 90s.
Buttons.
Yeah. And then the party in the back, the perm and all that stupid. Well, I don't know, stupid. It's coming back. The mullet. For some,
These things, they always go full circle. They always
they
come
sure
back.
do. Yeah. So at any rate, I ordered one online. Got it in. The color was okay. It wasn't a great match. So I went and found my local stylist that would cut it in, and they did, and I still wasn't really satisfied with the color. So I went back to them and I said, "So what do you have? I've spent this money and I'm not satisfied with the color, so I'm going to let you match me." And so they did, and that's this system here. It was fitted in November, so I've got what 2.5 months in on it.
Mhm.
And they cut it in. They did a great job. You saw the pictures that I shared with you
Oh yeah.
of the initial install. And it's been a learning curve dealing with the glue. That's a lot of tips from you and from other guys about how to clean it up, how to have less mess, how to not wash it so often. They never told me that in the early days, so I washed it every day. I was a mechanic, get grease on it, and wore it out early. I was like, wow, this thing's looking terrible. Let's try it out. Well, now you don't do that. We know that now. You guys, fortunately, I've acquired the knowledge from you guys and have learned that, hey, you can just wash your side hair and not wash everything.
Mm.
And I do. I take a washcloth and some like a dander shampoo and wash my side and be careful not to get it on top while it's attached. And that way I can keep the side hair clean and it doesn't itch. I don't have much itch on top.
Mhm.
Uh, I've learned what you said to ignore it or tap it, and
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah. It's
very
funny.
helpful.
It's funny though, isn't it? Because I went through a very similar phase, especially in my early days when it felt like it was itching all the time. And I read an article, it might have been on maybe Lord Hare's website or something, talking about the whole itching thing with systems. And one thing that they said was sometimes because you focus on it too much, and there's almost like an anxiety around when the next itch is going to come, that actually makes it worse. And actually doing something different and taking your focus away from the itch can actually make the itch go away.
Yeah.
And I've certainly found that super helpful. But Eric, I've got so many questions, right? Because you're a really interesting case in that you started wearing units in, I think you said the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken.
Early 90s, early,
Early
I was
90s,
born
sorry.
92, somewhere around there.
Yeah. And I'm really intrigued because obviously the technology of systems back then is so different to what we have now. And obviously there's much more, they have much more subtle technology in terms of like the front of the hairline and that kind of thing, probably more comfortable than it is now than it was back then. So in your opinion, kind of how has the technology changed?
So as I recall it, it's been a hot minute, but it was a it was a lace. I can't remember if it was kind of a coarser lace in the middle, and it had somewhat of a thick, I think it was almost a sewn in poly around the edges. And at the time, they did a weave, I think is what it was called. It would actually sort of braid your hair around the sides with some glue and a cable, and then they would sew it through the system on. Uh, and then it was a tape tab in the front. Now the front was I forget what they called it. It wasn't a lace front. The hair was sort of tied in and hung down, so you couldn't wear an exposed hairline. If you did, it was obvious. It was
Okay.
just way too thick. It wouldn't lay back. It'd be like be like
Like a
they used
mop.
to make fun of the gospel singers back in the day. My dad would listen to gospel music, and the guys that wore toupees had that big curve out front and too thick.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
had to wear it down, and as long as you did that, it was okay. And in the wind, it looked a little odd.
Mhm.
It didn't. It didn't behave
Normal
uh,
hair.
like hair does now. Yeah, you'd get a wind, and it'd be almost like the comb over. The hair would stand up and at attention, and you'd have to make sure you either had it sprayed down or gelled down good.
And how long did it last? And what was maintenance like?
Well, so I was going to, one of the things I was going to mention, the downside of the cable was that it would get sort of a traction soreness, and those places would get quite, that was for me is what happened. It got quite sore. And they would tell me, well, you're just pulling forward on it too much when you put the tape tab down and you're pulling on that. And of course, as the hair grew, it would loosen. So it was about every 4 to 6 weeks you go back for that. Well, it's continued to get sore, and it got infected on me one time. I've seen some pictures of some guys. So I was like, listen, this is not going to work. So they sewed in those little clips that you can do in the front and the back,
Yeah.
and then tape in the front. But those create kind of a traction soreness as well, because you're kind of dipping it into your hair and it pulls on it. So it gets sore as the day goes on. If you have to like I told you, I was a mechanic. So if I had to lay back down on something, it would push on the back of my head. It was uncomfortable. So then they came up with the newer kind of a newer bonding where it was a hard bond to the ends of the hair. They would shave the hair down to about, I don't know, maybe a quarter or eighth of an inch and glue it to the end of the hair. And that was a little better. It did hold up for as far as bonding goes. It didn't really cause a whole lot of soreness, but it still felt kind of odd. It was just, you always knew it was there. It's kind of like having a hat on your head. They were hot. They didn't breathe very well. And that's one reason I finally, it was one of the things, my dad and I were out working on the deck in the summertime. And at that time, dad had cut his comb over off and shaved it. And so I was sweating profusely, and so was he. And he took a rag and wiped his head off. And I was like, well, I wish I could do that. And he's like, well, you take it off your head, you could. And that was the afternoon that I decided that was it. And so, now backing up a little bit, I did find a company. This was like one of the main. I don't know. I don't want to mention names because.
Was it Hair Club?
No, it was. It was another. If you're okay with names, I can name
Yeah,
it.
go for it. Absolutely.
Okay, it was a company called Apollo Hair Systems.
Okay.
They have it around here, and it was back then. It was pretty pricey. It was like I think $2,500 for two systems.
Wow.
And this was early 90s. So, like I said, I didn't have a lot of money, but I saved up and did it. But a lot of synthetic hair in it, didn't behave like I told you. Wouldn't lay right. You had to fool with it. And at the back, it would lighten. So to be a line, we wore our hair longer then. So if you didn't keep it colored at the back, you'd see a line. So at any rate, I switched to this other, it was actually two stylists who left Apollo and started their own thing. And they used human hair, 100% human hair pieces. They were similar in design. They weren't as good as what we've got now, but it was better. I got to where I would tape it on, and they had this dabber cement. I forget now.
Cement.
Well, it basically it would retack the tape, so you'd have to retape every day.
Yeah.
I would take it off at night, put it on the head, and like every 4 or 5 days, I would replace the tape then. But each morning you get up and you would dab the tape. It would give it a good sticky adhesion again. And you could even redo the front tab as long as you hadn't sweated too much. It wasn't gooey. And so you just put it back on and good. And so I did that for a while. And then that's at the end was when I told you that time with my dad. And so that's when I finally said, I'm tired of dealing with this. So at 25 years old, I gave up on it. And I just was, okay, I'm not unusual. There's a lot of bald guys out there. I'll just blend in. I can't say I ever really liked it, but I just kind of, it just became normal for me. And I shaved my head from then on out. until this year. So I hope that maybe clarifies a few things.
Honestly, it's fascinating how much the technology firstly has changed from then to what we've got now. That's the most fascinating thing, but as well, the um the mental health struggles that you went through, sort of losing your hair, that's an actual constant, because you obviously still get guys now who are like losing their hair, and I certainly went through it 10 years ago. Is that struggle is still the same. And I read an article, that some research that had been done, I think it was in the UK, and they did a series of questions towards balding men, and they basically it aligned with the amount of mental health struggle that females face when they lose their hair due to chemotherapy or alopecia, which is pretty devastating for them. But it just shows that for males as well, losing their hair to male pattern baldness has just as large a mental health effect on them as it does on women suffering alopecia, or losing their hair to chemotherapy. So it really does have a massive, massive effect. And for me, certainly, I really struggled with anxiety and fear. And I used to be a very social animal, and then I became completely introverted as a result of, my hair loss. For me, it's slightly different. I had a condition called trichotillomania, which is compulsive hair pulling. But also I do suffer from male pattern baldness as well. So it was pretty horrific, but I can totally empathize with you having gone through that. And so many people watching this will have gone through that exact same struggle.
Well, you learn to compensate in other ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes over the top. I'm not a real, super extroverted person. I've become more confident as I've gotten older. As I was younger, I would have been very, introvert. I would not said a whole lot. But if somebody started making fun of me, I'd just blow it off. I would, whatever, and just move on. But yeah, I guess one of the hardest things was my best friend. He would, like, we'd be out cruising. This is when we were young and I first started leaving. He'd say, "Look at my bald, my friend's going bald here." And I'm like, "Really? You're my friend?"
Yeah,
No,
it's tough, isn't it?
we were still friends for the years. He was a good. He straightened up. He kept his hair, but at any rate, so that's kind of, we're all. Yeah, it seems like a lot of us are super detailed, maybe over
Yeah.
the top. ADHD.
ADHD, perfectionism,
Yeah,
all of those kind of type A personality traits.
yeah.
And also, because you would have started losing yours super young, and I'd been losing mine my whole life because of the hair pulling, I think it has a bigger impact on you when you're young, because most of your peers still have their hair at that age.
Yeah.
Whereas, like me and you, we were losing ours at a very young age. So that in itself is distressing. You go to parties and you're trying to attract women, but because your confidence is so blown by the fact you're losing your hair, it has a massive impact upon your ability to talk to, women or make friends or socialize.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. And people, and I never thought about it much, but people do treat you differently.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, there are minor nuances that most of the time you wouldn't notice, but after you get your hair and it looks good like this, like yours, they do treat you differently. And the ladies at the styling place for me, this International Wigs is the name of the place in Kingsport, Tennessee.
Yep.
They told me that. I said, you're not a bad looking man, bald, but you will notice the difference in the way you're treated after you put this on. So it is different for sure.
100%. And
And
subconsciously you feel more confident as well. Once you've got the hair back, you subconsciously feel more confident in yourself, because I suppose you feel like maybe when you lost your hair, you lost part of your identity. And then getting it back, you actually feel like yourself again.
yeah, and my hair was super thick. I had a wavy, kind of a strawberry blonde hair, massively. So I used to fuss about it because the lady would use thinning shears back then when I was a teenager, young, before I started going bald, to try to thin it out because it's so thick. It was like a too thick hair system.
Yeah, like 130% one.
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah. It was, if I didn't calm it down, I come out of the bed, it was bed everywhere. So, but at any rate, that's where that was at. And then, like I said, it's, uh, like for instance, oh yeah, now I remember where I was going with that. So this morning, I'd taken my hair system off last night, cleaned it all up, and I'm getting ready to go on a trip. So I wanted the ladies to apply it, make sure it's on straight, make sure the coats are all good. So I went bald this morning with a hat to the place and took my system with me. And when I looked in the mirror this morning, I was like, I really just don't like the way I look like an old man. You've got your hair grown out now, so you can see the horseshoe a little more
Horseshoe.
shaving.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I call it, the horseshoe. It's
Yeah.
the fringe around the sides.
Yeah.
And as you can tell, I have thinned out
Mhm.
on the sides as well. So I would, on another note, I would advise guys not to consider the transplant route, because if you spent $10,000 to $20,000 to take donor hair from here and you get to be 40 or 50, well, genetically, it's going to give up too, or at least thin out. So you spent all that money to fill this back in up here, and it's going to fall back out again. So
Yeah.
why would you do that?
Yeah. And I think, what I say to people as well who are thinking about the transplant route, is that you have to take Propecia medication to stop it all coming out again. And that comes with a lot of its own side effects, And I know some people who have had, I wouldn't say lifelong because I think that's being hyperbolic, but I know people who have been suffering side effects for 20 years, even though they've stopped the Propecia, and they're still getting erectile dysfunction and stuff like that. So it's risky, it's risky.
Well, and that's an area I didn't hit on either, because I did do that. I did try that. I went to the doctor after I'd given up on hair. I'm like, well, maybe I can get some of it back. So I tried the minoxidil from Walmart, it's cheap, and then went that route and did have those side effects in a marriage, and that's not the good thing to have.
No, exactly.
I'm worried about my hair that I give up my.
Yeah. You need that to be working down there,
Exactly. Yeah, your wife doesn't. So
yeah.
at any
I think
rate,
that, to have a healthy marriage, it helps if that's working downstairs.
so go ahead.
So let's talk about your current system, because I came across it on the Facebook group. I was just scrolling through and I saw it and I was like, wow, because not just the color is right, but the density is very appropriate for your age bracket, which I thought is quite often you'll see people who maybe go a bit too thick, not knowing necessarily that they might be new to hair systems. They may be in their 50s or 60s and they might go for 100% or 110, and it looks actually thicker than their side hair. Whereas with yours, it's just right. The density is just right. The color is just right. Is it a lace base or is it a poly?
It's lace in the middle. It's kind of got that X poly, and then poly around the sides and the front of it. So
So there's a poly at the front as well.
It is, yes.
That's really interesting, because your hairline, like the most natural hairlines, usually lace, but ultra thin skin polys aren't quite as good. But yours actually, I thought it was a lace because it actually looks like it's coming out of your scalp.
Yep. Yeah, let's say it's a little higher end one than you'd order off the regular, like Vivid Lord Hair, any of those.
Yeah.
It's according to the way it's marketed, but I mean, obviously I'm pretty happy with it. Now I've got some of the others I've ordered to have backups. So I've ordered some of the other ones off the market just to see what they have.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. But yeah, this is Polly. She never could get me the exact. Apparently, the American Hairlines doesn't divulge everything. They did give the density, which is 0.93.
Okay.
I did have them thin it.
Mhm.
This has got a couple of months on it, so I have had some breakage. Even though I'm diligent about conditioning it. I'm diligent about not over combing and making sure it's not tangled. But so I've gradually, and it's a little higher now because I've trimmed the poly back as the hairs, kind of. So, but I mean, it still works. It kind of looks like me when I was first starting to lose it. The hairline went up and the side, so it looks like a 50-some-year-old man with a receding hairline.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like, which is realistic. And so the one thing I would say, I think some guys make the judgment to buy a hair system thicker because they know it's going to shed. They've read about that. They hear about the loss of hair. And so from an economic decision, they decide to go for thicker so it lasts longer and they don't have to replace it as often. Well,
Yeah.
the whole reason we're putting hair on our heads is to look realistic, to look real,
Yeah.
appropriate for the age. I mean, if you're 20 something, maybe you can rock that. But
Yeah.
if you're 40 or 50, your density has definitely come down. I don't care who you are. It's very rare to see a man with very thick hair on the sides at that age. There are some, but they're
Yeah.
not the norm. They're the anomaly.
Yeah.
So, so even if you want to be real about it, you need to buy a system or have the system thin to the point where it matches your density on the sides. Otherwise, you've got a big pile of hair on top of your head that doesn't match anything, and it's obvious. I mean, you might as well wear a raccoon hat or something.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
100%.
about how pronounced it is. So,
Yeah.
so I would say, don't make an economic decision to purchase a hair system just because you want it to last longer. You want it to look real. That's the whole reason you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And I seem to remember you saying as well that it's actually a stock system which you're wearing. And
Yes.
a lot of people, they'll come to me and say, I'm in my 50s, I must need a custom. And I was like, no, actually, not necessarily. You can order a 60% or a 70% density, poly or a lace, and it's a stock system. So I think it's really important for people to remember that, number one. And a question I had about sort of moving forward is, do you sort of plan to sort of maintain wearing a system for the long term, or is it just more of a short term thing for you?
In my mind, I'm committed to it. I like it, even with the time sacrifices. And obviously, if you as guys that are new to it, there are some time sacrifices. Learning how to deal with it first couple of months, and you'll see that in the videos as you watch and learn. But you plan those out. Like I think you mentioned in a recent video, plan it for a Saturday afternoon or a Friday evening when you know you're not going to be. There's nobody's yelling at you to come do this, come do that. Go wherever you're going to. I've got a basement and I've got my own bathroom, and so it doesn't bother anyone. I got all my stuff stored down here, and so when I get ready to do my own service, I plan it out.
Yeah.
And so it's really, if you think about other things you do that you plan your time, like said, for instance, a hunter, he's going to go out and sit in the woods for 2 or 3 hours to try to find his whatever he's hunting.
Yeah.
And he's going to spend days doing that, preparing for that hunt to try to find where that deer or whatever's coming through is, so he can get it. So we do a lot of things that we spend a lot of time on. So some people would say, well, that's vanity. Well, if it's worth it to you, then it's worth it. To spend that time, what little extra time, and it gets better as you learn. I can knock it out in sometimes less than an hour. The got to be lube thing. I mean, if you're just looking for a regular, like every 2 or 3 day thing, it's not necessarily good for the hairline. At least for me, my hairline's kind of oily, so it'll lift pretty quick. But for the sides and the back, you can use the got to be glued around there. I use the black one, seems to work better, the ultra. And it'll stay bonded securely, at least for wintertime wear, as long as you're not sweating or getting wet. And then all you gotta do is flip it forward, leave the front bonded, clean it off, put it back down, and you're good to go for it. So there's quick things to do that make getting ready easy. Heck, bed head. I mean, I tried the little hat, the little
the do-rag,
but it leaves
it does leave a mark.
A mark, and it's a couple of hours too. So you got this mark in your head if you go out public.
Yeah, someone might have thought you'd fallen down the stairs last night or something,
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of the guys who have sleep apnea, and they've got the CPAP on the side of their a lot of my friends that have sleep apnea, they have that. And so I'm like, I look like I got a CPAP
I've
thing.
got sleep apnea too.
Yeah, but the satin pillow or the silk pillow work great.
Yeah.
Really, at this hairstyle, I don't really have a whole lot of bed head. Really, my bio hair is the more, kind of oily and messed up, and that's easy to rectify. And then from there, you just kind of wet it down, spray and conditioner. And if you want to use a gel, I got to be glued with some water on my fingers and just kind of go through it. And then you're good to go. I mean, it's a pretty easy. And so it's really just getting used to fooling with something. You fool with a lot of things.
Yeah.
A lot of people fool with old cars.
Yeah.
And they spend hours in their garage doing that. But so you could spend an hour or 2 get your system yourself. Save yourself a ton of money.
Definitely.
Yep.
For me, it's 100% worth it. Labor of love. And as we're running quite short on time, Eric, I just wanted to, if you wouldn't mind mentioning the name of your stylist in Tennessee, because I've got quite a few people who want to know, that there might be some people in Tennessee and they don't know where to find a stylist who can do this. So if you wouldn't mind sharing their name or website or something like that.
Yeah, it's I don't have the website in front of me, but if you'll just Google International Wigs
Yeah.
in Kingsport, Tennessee,
Mhm.
KINGSPORT, Tennessee.
Okay.
That's my stylist. It's a family owned operation. She's second generation owner. Her name is Heather Gardner.
Mm-hmm.
And she has a stylist there too that cuts in. Her name is Amanda. I can't think of Amanda's last name, but
Okay.
very good, very easy to deal with, low pressure.
Yeah.
And it's kind of it's kind of around the backside of the building. So if you're concerned about being, out in the open, maybe you want to go in there privately, that's kind of like that. So
Excellent. Well, I'm gonna whack that. I'm gonna whack their name and I'm gonna find their URL and I'm gonna put that in the description box for anyone who's sort of Tennessee based, who's looking for a hair system stylist, because that quite often could be the hardest bit, finding a hair system stylist. So hopefully some people find that really helpful. Eric, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with me. And I know that so many people are going to find this really, really valuable. So thank you so much.
certainly, yeah. And reach out anytime. I'll be happy to talk or chat with anybody. So
Sure. Thank you.
So, guys, I'd love to hear what you thought of that interview. What did you find really interesting? What did you enjoy about it? I was personally so blown away by Eric's commitment to get back into the hair system game after so long of actually not having any hair on his head. And it's really nice to see the transformation that he felt even 30 years after wearing his first system, giving up on it for decades and then getting back into it. I really loved when he said, you know what, I can see myself wearing systems because it's given me a new lease of life. I could see myself wearing them for the rest of my life. What do you guys think? Did you enjoy this interview? Let me know in the comments box below. If you're enjoying my content, please don't forget to like and subscribe.